She mopped the floors no one noticed, in a tower built on polished smiles and quiet prejudice. He ran the company, certain power would always protect him. But one late night, a simple routine, and a truth no one planned to see left a stain he couldn't scrub away. Now, with headlines circling and an empire trembling, the only person he refused to see may be his only hope in court. What did the black janitor witness? And why did it take a courtroom for her voice to finally matter? Most nights, Maya laced her boots, packed a dented thermos, and rode the quiet bus to the glass tower that glowed like a second sun. She was the black janitor who kept the building breathing after hours. Gloves on, cart rolling, floors shining by morning. Her world was the freight elevator, the whisper of vents, the soft click of lights snapping off as offices emptied. Security scanned her badge twice. Executives rushed past without a glance. In a place covered in mission statements about inclusion, she was treated like part of the wallpaper. She knew the tower better than anyone who worked there. Which carpets kept secrets, which doors never truly closed, which cameras blinked and which didn't. She moved with practiced care, leaving everything better than she found it, erasing the day's messes and the traces of tempers no one would admit. Her phone held reminders for bills, a saved flyer for a night course she hoped to take, and photos of her nephew who thought the skyline belonged to her. On the top floor, the air always felt colder. The CEO's world lived there. Polished wood, curated art, the hush of power. He passed her sometimes, eyes sliding past as if she were a shadow. He didn't know she noticed everything, the pattern of his late nights, the way meetings stretched. Past midnight when headlines turned rough, the small rituals people keep when they're hiding pressure. Then the pattern shifted. A light that shouldn't have been on, a door not fully shut. A rustle in a room that was usually still. Something left where nothing should be left, small enough to overlook, sharp enough to matter. She finished her route like always, but the night had already changed. Soon the floors she polished would echo in a courtroom, and the man who never saw her would need the one person the building taught him to ignore. The boardroom on 35 should have been dark. Instead, a wash of cold light spilled under the door, and the hum of a projector bled into the hallway. Maya paused only long enough to steady her cart. Through the glass, shapes moved. Senior. Faces she knew by their gait and their tailored silhouettes. The language in the air was the kind she had learned to decode without trying. Risk, optics, culture fit. On the credenza, a folder sat half open. A page with names arranged in neat rows, check marks pressed hard enough to dent the paper. She logged the room, wiped the fingerprints from the table, and lifted the folder back into place with gloved hands. The clock on the wall said, "Too late." The cameras above the door blinked once and went still. By morning, an entire workstation on 23 had been emptied. The woman who used to wave when Maya arrived had vanished, her chair pushed in with careful finality. Security scanned Maya's bag twice, then waved a contractor through without looking. In the elevator, a man in a suit adjusted his tie and stepped in front of her, then pretended not to notice. Policies about respect were framed on every wall. The frame on the top floor hung a fraction crooked. The story hit the news before the week ended. A lawsuit. Racial discrimination. The CEO's name yoked to words like pattern and purge. Maya recognized the plaintiff's face from late nights and tired smiles by the vending machine. She remembered the paper with check marks and a column, labeled performance that read more like permission. She also remembered something else. The CEO leaving early that night, coat over his arm, the weight of a bad week on his shoulders. A senior executive slipping into the CEO's office after alone, the glow of a screen painting the hallway a hard blue. When she mopped that carpet an hour later, the chair behind the desk was still warm. Her phone buzzed with a shift change. Fewer hours. A new rule about staying off the executive floor unless called. A warning from her supervisor about lingering. In the trash outside legal, she found ripped printouts, fragments of emails with timestamps that didn't line up with her cleaning logs. Words like scrub and message discipline floated up between coffee grounds. Also, a note slid under her cart one night, a single sentence telling her to mind her lane. The handwriting looked careful, like someone afraid of their own letters. A week later, a stranger in a neat coat waited by the service entrance. Not press. Not HR. A lawyer for the defense with a badge printed that morning and a polite voice that didn't quite hide urgency. Building logs had put her on the floor at crucial times. Did she remember anything unusual? She remembered too. Much. The light that should have been off. The blinking camera. The warm chair. The folder with names pressed into paper like bruises. She also remembered how quickly a person like her could be pushed into silence. She backed up her notes, saved the photo she took for a maintenance ticket that captured the wall clock in the background, circled the minute hand in red in a private folder. She thought about the woman on 23, about her nephew who believed the skyline belonged to her, about the way truth can feel like a door that will not open unless someone puts their shoulder to it. Then she said yes. Word spread, fast. Eyes followed her in hallways that used to be empty at night. The top floor went spotless in a way that felt less like clean and more like erased. On the morning of her deposition, her schedule was suddenly switched to another building. She showed up anyway. Inside a conference room colder than the executive suite, she told them what she saw, what she didn't, and what the building itself seemed to remember. When she stepped out, her phone held a new date and a location that made her chest tighten, a courtroom. The day she walked up the courthouse steps, the CEO looked smaller than the tower that had shaped both of their lives. He still didn't meet her eyes. The bailiff called the room to order, and the air thinned. She took a breath, placed her hand where they told her, and felt every night in that building gather behind her like a tide. What she was about to say could save a man who never saw her, or pull the whole story into the light. The room tightened around her as she took the stand, oak, marble, and the hush of people waiting to see if her voice would matter. Maya felt every night on those floors rise in her chest. She wasn't an executive. She wasn't a consultant. She was the black janitor who saw what power tried to keep after hours. The defense needed her. The truth needed more. She walked the jury through the building's memory. The top floor light that should have been off, the camera that blinked, and then went dead. The chair still warm behind the CEO's desk after he'd left, the list with names pressed into paper like bruises. She traced the minutes, not with spreadsheets, but with sounds and habits. An elevator chime at 12:09, the beep of a keycard at the executive door at 12:11, the glow of a screen along a hallway that was always dark. Then the pushback came. Titles were emphasized. Uniforms were noted. Her job was treated like a flaw. Questions circled her memory, her angle, even her worth. She answered with specifics and steadiness. She described the maintenance ticket she filed that night, the photo attached by policy that accidentally captured the wall clock behind the desk. She explained how the timestamp on her app matched the sweep log and how both landed after the CEO's exit, then overlapped with an access beep she had marked down because it always startled her. The photo slid into the record. Jurors leaned forward. A name surfaced in the keycard data that wasn't the CEO's. The neat columns in that folder no longer looked like performance. They looked like targeting. Faces she knew, too many of them black, clustered on that page in a way you could feel without a calculator. A pattern had a pulse now. Across the room, the CEO finally looked at her, not past her, at her. For him, this was survival. For her, it was a reckoning. She had become his only hope in court by telling a story that refused to protect anyone's comfort. The judge's gavel cut the air for a short recess. Papers rustled. Whispers rose. Maya stood unblinking. In the next breath, the building's secrets would either spark change or get cleaned away like they were never there at all. The verdict didn't rewrite history, but it wrote a line no one could erase. Mid-trial, the board agreed to settle with the employees who had been pushed out. An independent monitor, public reporting. The executive who engineered the purge stepped down. The CEO avoided personal liability for the timeline that night, saved by the truth she carried, but not the weight of a culture he had led. Accountability and escape route, both in the same breath. Maya returned to nights at the tower for a while. The badge still beeped twice. Some people finally said her name. Some spoke to her louder, as if volume were respect. A few looked through her harder than before. She knew change can be cosmetic. Lemons can smell like progress. Still, cameras were replaced. Key cards were audited. The list no longer hid on a credenza. Hiring and firing moved into rooms with windows and notes that could be traced. She enrolled in the night course saved in her phone, not because a courtroom made her brave, but because she always was. Her nephew visited, pointing at the skyline with belief too big for his hands. She let him keep it. The plaintiff she remembered from the vending machine landed on steadier ground, not where she started, but where her work was valued and paid for. Beyond their lives, the story traveled. Some argued about optics. Others recognized the pattern. Like an old bruise, racism in workplaces doesn't always shout. Sometimes it schedules, edits, and files. It thrives where some are invisible and others are forgiven, where titles are shields and uniforms are excuses. If a voice like Maya's can crack a tower open, what could happen if we listened before the gavel? Notice who's unseen where you work. Document what feels off. Back the people who speak up. Share this story with someone who still thinks silence is neutral. The question isn't whether the floor shines. It's who gets to stand on it and who is still wiping their footprints away.